Pick up the phone in your hand.
Yeah.
Look at the grid of applications. Look at the layout of the screen, the curvature of the text, the blank spaces between the icons. You likely believe these are passive tools, waiting inertly for your command.
Well, they are not. You are holding an architecture of perception.
You are living through an epistemological rupture right now, and the interfaces surrounding you, the algorithmic feeds you consume, the layout of your local hospital, the borders of your country. These are active, highly engineered mechanisms that manage your cognition.
Because design is no longer a matter of aesthetics. It is a biological and political apparatus. It determines precisely what you notice.
Right.
It dictates what you ignore. It decides what you remember. And ultimately, it constructs what you believe to be real.
So the mission of this briefing is to map this cognitive architecture. We are going to provide you with the empirical data necessary to survive an era of existential fragmentation. But to understand how your perception is systematically hijacked, we have to first establish the biological baseline of your own processing.
Yes, you are operating under strict neurological limits.
I mean, limits governed entirely by the reality of your working memory.
Exactly. Your working memory has a strictly finite capacity. Every piece of data you encounter demands a portion of this capacity. And this burden is divided into two distinct categories, which are intrinsic cognitive load and extraneous cognitive load.
Right, so let's break that down.
Well, intrinsic cognitive load is the inherent, unavoidable complexity of the information itself. So if you are learning advanced calculus, the intrinsic load is high. Extraneous cognitive load, however, is the friction generated by how that information is presented to you.
I mean, to clarify, if the intrinsic load is the calculus problem itself, the extraneous load is the illegible font the problem is written in, or a poorly laid out textbook that forces your eyes to dart back and forth to find the formula.
Precisely, and the entire discipline of modern digital and environmental design has been optimized to systematically eliminate that extraneous cognitive load. But this is not done as a public service.
No, it is not.
This optimization is engineered to exploit your biological defaults. Your brain is inherently conservative with its energy. It is lazy. It is heavily biased. To survive without being overwhelmed, it relies on rapid, automatic, heuristic shortcuts.
What Daniel Kahneman defines as System 1 thinking.
Right. Interfaces are constructed to trigger this exact System 1 automaticity. They induce a state of cognitive ease, and they do it through foundational visual hierarchy. When you open a web page or an application, the manipulation of scale, color contrast, and Z patterns algorithmically directs your gaze.
It doesn't invite you to explore.
Yeah.
It dictates the exact chronological sequence in which you will consume the information.
Exactly. And this manipulation is reinforced by the biological craving for symmetry, the Gestalt principle of pregnance. When your brain perceives highly ordered, symmetrical, balanced design, it recognizes that no analytical effort is required. It registers safety.
So your heart rate physically lowers.
Yes. Dopamine is released into your system.
Which brings us to the psychological authority of negative space, what designers call white space. You have been conditioned to view white space as an empty canvas, or simply clean aesthetics. It is never empty. It is an active cognitive relief mechanism. I mean, in commercial interfaces, massive amounts of negative space are deployed to signal premium positioning.
It communicates an absolute absence of desperation.
Yes. But make no mistake about what this actually functions as.
Yeah.
This negative space, this perfectly balanced visual hierarchy is not simply good design. It is a highly controlled sensory deprivation chamber.
Comforting, yet intentionally engineered to strip you of your critical resistance. You are anesthetized by clarity.
But if we are being continuously anesthetized, what happens when that anesthesia wears off? Or worse, what is the cost of existing in a permanent state of numbness?
Well, this cognitive ease has been weaponized. It's become a destructive ideological cult of seamlessness. For decades, the technology sector has sold you a specific narrative. They say the highest achievement of infrastructure is to disappear entirely.
Right. No friction. No interruption between your sudden desire and its immediate fulfillment.
The mechanisms are ubiquitous. Infinite scroll, autoplay, predictive algorithms that feed you your next thought before you even possess the vocabulary to form it yourself.
But the systematic elimination of external friction does not create freedom. It creates a psychological catastrophe. What the modern technology industry sells to you as efficiency and progress is, empirically, a system of psychological extraction.
It forces human curiosity to collapse entirely into passive consumption.
Right, but logically, if the friction is removed, shouldn't life be easier? Why are the populations interacting with these frictionless systems experiencing record levels of psychological collapse?
Because the friction does not actually vanish, it is simply displaced. I mean, the external world stops resisting you, which means the resistance is internalized into your own psyche. This is what Byung-Chul Han calls the burnout society.
The Müdigkeitsgesellschaft.
Exactly. When an algorithmic feed has no natural stopping point, when it scrolls infinitely, the environment no longer tells you when you are finished. You are forced to generate the willpower to stop yourself.
You must constantly regulate your own boundaries against a machine designed to dissolve them.
You become the exploiter of your own nervous system. The result is deep systemic exhaustion.
You are burning out because you are carrying the structural load the interface abandoned. And what you lose in this transaction is epistemic patience. You lose the uniquely human capacity for negative capability.
John Keats' concept.
Right. The ability to exist in uncertainty, in mystery, and in doubt without rushing to a premature finalized answer. You have been conditioned by seamlessness to demand instant resolution.
And because seamlessness directly causes this cognitive atrophy, your psychological survival requires intervention. It requires the deliberate structural reintroduction of friction. You must seek out and interact with seamful design.
Seamful design, Mark Weiser and John Brown's concept.
Yes. Seamful systems are the exact inverse of seamless ones. They explicitly reveal their complexity. They expose their ambiguity. They deliberately show you their infrastructural boundaries and their limitations.
Wait, stop there. This presents a critical vulnerability. If we intentionally break your flow state, if we deliberately introduce cognitive friction into the interfaces you use daily, how do we prevent you from simply abandoning the system?
What do you mean?
I mean, in a free market, if an application frustrates you, you delete it and download an easier, more manipulative alternative. So how does seamful design survive?
You tolerate it because, in high-stakes environments, friction is the only mechanism that builds genuine, verifiable trust. Consider data privacy dashboards, secure financial systems, or electronic voting platforms.
Right.
If an e-voting system is entirely seamless, if you tap a button and your vote instantly vanishes into a frictionless interface, it operates as a black box, it induces intense anxiety because its operations are hidden.
It feels indistinguishable from a malfunction or manipulation.
Precisely.
Right.
By forcing you to pause, by demanding multiple verifications, by revealing the actual seams of its security protocols, the system intentionally breaks your reliance on that lazy, automatic System 1 thinking.
It forces you to re-engage your analytical, deliberative, cognitive pathways. You stop passively consuming the interface, and you begin actively evaluating it.
Which requires a fundamental shift in how the architecture around you is built. It requires moving far past the superficial corporate concept of user empathy.
Because empathy is a marketing term. It is used by corporations to smooth over your immediate pain points, but it intentionally obscures the structural rot beneath. It puts a bandage on the symptom to keep you consuming.
Superficial empathy must be replaced by deep sociological curiosity.
Right.
Deep curiosity does not seek to comfort you. It approaches systems the exact way an ethical hacker approaches a secure network, aggressively analyzing it for vulnerabilities, failure points, and hidden power dynamics. This is rooted in historical models like Jane Addams' sympathetic social inquiry.
It utilizes an upgraded methodology of asking why.
Yes, the upgraded 5 whys.
And you do not ask why merely to find a localized mechanical fault. You do not ask why the button didn't load. You ask why repeatedly to excavate the shared human values, dignity, safety, autonomy that the system is actively threatening.
But this precarious balance between cognitive ease and necessary friction is currently facing total obliteration. Generative artificial intelligence is not merely the next phase of technological advancement.
No, it is a total epistemic rupture. Generative AI is an immediate existential threat to the cognitive processes we just mapped. If AI acts as a cognitive bypass, stripping away our ability to tolerate friction, we don't just lose our analytical skills, we lose our ability to process reality.
To comprehend the severity of this threat, you must understand the epistemology of practice, specifically Donald Schoen's concept of reflection on action.
Right.
True, enduring human understanding is only generated through a demanding physical and cognitive process. A creator converses with their materials. You draft a thought, you observe its flaws, you make a mistake.
And that exact mistake generates the structural insight required to move forward. Reflection, and therefore intelligence, emerges exclusively through resistance.
Exactly. Generative AI bypasses this entirely. It is not a tool. It is an intellectual bypass surgery.
It delivers instantaneous, polished, grammatically perfect outputs without demanding a single calorie of cognitive labor from you. If the machine eliminates the struggle of thought, your cognitive muscle inevitably withers.
And the empirical result playing out right now is mass cognitive offloading.
You accept the algorithmic output as truth simply because it visually mimics competence. It looks correct, therefore you believe it is correct.
This is epistemic atrophy. To survive this, AI infrastructure must immediately evolve from an architecture of persuasion into cognitive scaffolding.
So explain the mechanism of that scaffolding. How does an AI stop persuading and start scaffolding?
Well, it requires structural interventions embedded into the code itself. Technologies must embed what we define as study modes. Instead of spitting out a synthesized essay in 2 seconds, the architecture must intentionally withhold immediate closure.
It must expose its confidence levels.
Right. It must reveal the exact statistical biases of its training data. And most crucially, it must force a prompt onto your screen demanding that you articulate your own reasoning or rate your confidence in a premise before it provides you with an answer.
It must force you to do the work. Because if it doesn't, if AI completely strips our ability to engage in difficult, frictional thought, we lose our ability to debate reality itself, which forces design to step in as a vital political defense mechanism. The myth of neutral design is entirely dead.
Completely dead. The layout of your digital and physical world is not commercial production. It is civic intervention. It decides which bodies are privileged, whose movement is restricted, and whose realities are entirely erased from the public sphere.
This specific intervention is defined as adversarial design, Carl DeSalvo's framework.
Yes, which is rooted in Chantal Mouffe's theory of agonism. This framework rejects the dangerous illusion of a perfectly harmonious, consensus-driven democracy. A true democratic society requires constant looping arguments.
It requires forever looping contestation.
Exactly. When interfaces, urban layouts, or algorithms enforce a false, fragile consensus, they inevitably silence marginalized realities. Adversarial design exists to break that consensus. It exposes hidden hegemonies and physically forces you to confront competing ideologies.
And this philosophy extends heavily into speculative design. The objective here is not to build functional commercial products for you to buy. The objective is to materialize hypothetical, often terrifying trajectories, so that society is forced to look at the immediate physical consequences of its current actions.
Consider the empirical example of the Possibilities Project. Designers did not write a report about climate change. They created tangible, material artifacts functioning as future fossils.
Ground this for the listener. What exactly does a future fossil look and feel like?
It is a synthetic, physical object engineered to look like an archaeological discovery from a ruined future. The creators merge established historical facts, such as the actual fossilized remains of prehistoric giant turtles, with local cultural myths, like the Catalan monster La Cucafera.
And they fuse these elements with present-day degraded marine textures, right? Integrating industrial plastics and bleached coral forms.
Yes. By synthesizing history, myth, and synthetic degradation into a heavy, tangible object you can hold in your hands, the design bypasses your intellectual defenses. It forces you to physically confront the terrifying reality of human-induced ecological collapse.
It demands that you ask what fictions are currently being constructed for your future and who is constructing them.
And this is where the stakes reach their absolute highest. When governments, corporations, and algorithmic systems actively collude to distort reality, the built environment itself becomes the last remaining truth infrastructure capable of proving what actually happened.
We are talking about architecture as legally binding testimony against state violence. We have transitioned entirely out of the post-war era of the witness. Human memory is fallible, it degrades, it is easily manipulated by the trauma of violence.
We have now entered the decade of evidence.
This is the apex of design as civic intervention, defined as forensic architecture by Al Weisman.
Right. The built environment around you, the concrete ruins, the scarred landscapes, the structural damage of a bombed building is now legally binding scientific data. Look at Alexander Kluge's brutality in stone. Architecture is no longer just a container for human activity. It is a material witness. It absorbs and records the brutality inflicted upon it.
So how exactly is a ruined building translated into evidence that can dismantle a state narrative? Walk through the methodology.
The foundational methodology is spatiotemporal modeling. Investigators do not just look at photographs, they construct flawless, millimeter-precise digital 3D models of contested, violent sites.
And then they synthesize entirely disparate fragments of chaotic data onto this digital grid. They map satellite imagery, acoustic analyses of gunfire, leaked state documents, and civilian smartphone footage captured from multiple angles.
Yes. Let's use empirical proof. Look at the murder of Halit Yozgat. Official state narratives claimed intelligence officers present at the scene saw nothing and heard nothing.
A human witness can lie, but the physical environment cannot.
Precisely. In the Yozgat investigation, investigators built a digital replica of the internet cafe where the murder occurred. They didn't just model the walls, they applied complex fluid dynamics to simulate the exact aerodynamic spread of gunpowder smoke discharged from the specific weapon used.
Right. They matched the acoustic reverberation of the shots against the physical dimensions of the room. Through exact camera matching techniques, they aligned the shadows and angles from civilian footage with their 3D model.
And they proved an undeniable structural continuity between the physical ruin and the digital reconstruction. By simulating the exact trajectory of the discharged bullets and the spread of the smoke, the spatiotemporal modeling proved that it was physically impossible for the state intelligence officer not to have seen the body or smelled the smoke.
It dismantles official, fabricated state narratives using the irrefutable laws of physics and spatial design. It forces accountability. It builds entirely new public forums for transitional justice when traditional legal systems are compromised, corrupted, or simply refuse to function.
This is absolute truth infrastructure.
We must synthesize this reality for you. The central crisis of the 21st century is not technological insufficiency. We have an overwhelming excess of technology. The crisis is existential fragmentation. You are being methodically dismantled by the very environments built to serve you.
Your attention is extracted by seamless algorithms. Your cognitive pathways are atrophied by generative bypasses.
And your political realities are distorted by interfaces that enforce false consensus. To survive this, the architecture of your world must fundamentally transition. The design of your digital and physical life must cease extracting your attention. It must begin restoring your human agency.
It must demand friction to restore your memory. It must require labor to restore your capacity for depth.
Look at the room around you right now. Look at the screen you are holding. Look at the invisible, frictionless, aggressively seamless grid of your day. What unseen architectural force is managing your memory right now? And what exactly is it forcing you to forget?